Hello everyone and welcome to the third video in Make a Game, a series on making a cool little video game in Unity. In the last video we made our first script and I talked about components and game objects and overall how to use Unity to do coding functionality. And in this one we are going to expand on some of the code we made the last time to make our ball jump. And we are also going to make a script that makes our main camera follow our ball around. And we're also going to talk about 3D perspective and yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So first off, let's open up Unity. I've already done this. And let me just explain the first script we are going to be making here. It's this one. And basically, what we want to do is we want to check if we press a button, and if the and this could be any button. This could be a W, this could be the space bar, it could be anything. But if the player presses a button and the ball is currently standing on something, we want to check for this, because else we would be able to jump unlimited amounts of times in the air and therefore almost fly. So we want to check if the ball is standing on something before you can jump. Well, then we want to make the ball jump. And we do this by adding velocity on the y-axis. If you don't know this, 3D space is composed by 3 axes. A normal screen just uses 2, so a 2D surface uses 2 axes, and these are normally called the X and the Y axes. And this is what makes up everything you see on a 2D display. But once we add the depth in 3D, we get the Z axis. So whenever we want our ball to jump, if we look at it from this perspective here, we want him to jump in the Y axis, so we add velocity. Now, that's the first thing we're going to be making. I know this is the second thing and it all looks very confusing, but trust me, it's not. We'll get into it. Don't worry. So cool. So today we're just going to be doing all kinds of fancy scripting stuff to make our game fun to play. And then the next time we can do some level design and make it look cool. Okay, so I've talked enough already. Let's double click the ball control script, which is the one we are going to be changing. So double click it to open it up in Mono Develop, and it opened up on my other monitor. So there we have it. I'll just zoom in here so you guys can see. And okay, so first off, let's make the variable we are going to be needing. This one is called jump height, or strength, or whatever you want to call it. I'll call it jump height. And by default, this is going to be equal to 8. That's just an estimate of how large the number should be. I actually can't remember quite exactly. Then we want to make a private variable, and this is something we are going to be using just in a sec. And basically, to explain what a private variable is, let me first explain the variable again. So the variable is a container of information. It's basically a box where we can put everything in and then later open it and use it in a script. Like we do here, we make a box with the rotation and then we open it and access everything in it, and then we use it with the delta time. That's the basic idea of it. But we also have different kinds of boxes. We have a box which we can change inside of Unity. So that's just a normal variable. This can only be accessed inside of the script or by changing it in the inspector panel. Then we have private variables, like the one we are going to be making now, called private var. And this is basically a closed box which you can only access inside of this script, which won't show up in the inspector. And then of course we have static variables. These are often confused with public variables, and what they do is it's basically a box open to everyone, so all the other scripts can also access it. But we'll just start up with a private variable here. We'll get into using the other ones at some point probably. So private var, and we're going to call this is falling. And the reason why we want this to be private is because we don't want to be able to change this inside of Unity. This is only something we need in the script. And this is going to be equal to false. Remember the semicolon. Cool. Now in the function update, let's go down below where we handle the rotation. And actually right above that, let's make a new line. And then 2 slashes like this, 2 dashes. And that means a comment. So whenever we make these 2 signs, we can write whatever and it won't do anything. It's only a comment on the script. So here we can write handle rotation, handle ball rotation. Let's call it that. But you can write everything you want. So if you find that I tell you something you find hard to remember, please write a comment about it, or something you wouldn't be able to just look at and know what is. Write a comment, it's great, and it makes it easier for others to read your code too. Okay, moving on. I'm really rambling today. I'm sorry. Okay, so now we want to add, now we want to check for input. So we type if, open a parentheses, and if statements, I'll explain that in a sec. Let's first type input dot get key down, open parentheses, key code dot w. You can also do dot space. I'll do dot w. Close the parentheses, close the other parentheses, and then make 2 bracket keys. Okay, so this all looks very confusing. It's not. You might get the basic idea. If statements are made for checking if things are true, if things happen, if things are equal to other things. It's made for checking all kinds of stuff. And therefore if. So if the requirements inside of these parentheses are met, then it will call all of the code. It will do all of the actions we put inside of these 2 bracket keys. That's what an if statement does. And if statements are some of the most used things in coding. Now let's take a look at the requirement we put here. It's called input.getKeyDown. So if we get the key pressed, called keycode.w. And there are many ways to write this. We could also do get button down and then jump. This is actually a better way to do it, though it's not always set up correctly. We'll have a look at buttons later probably. But for now, we'll just type get key down keycode dot w like that, and then close it off. Awesome. So there are also different kinds of input events. We could also just say get key. This is if you want something to happen all the time when you're pressing a button. So this will call the function as long as you're pressing the button. Get key down will call it only when you press it, which means once. And get key up will call it when you release the button, which again means once. Inside of this, we'll now type rigid body. Again, just when we, as we did when we accessed the rotation or the torque, we will now access the velocity, and then we will do it in the .y-axis, which means up and down, and we want this to be equal to jump height. So basically we are setting a velocity for our object on the y-axis to the jump height, which is 8, which means it will go up. If this was -8, it would go down. And cool, now that we have that in place, let's go ahead and test it out. You will notice that we haven't used our private variable there yet. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to show you what we have so far. So if we hit play now, And remember, we already have the script attached to our ball, so we don't have to do that again. We can see it sitting right there. And we have the jump height variable. And if we hit jump with W, we can see our ball jumping nicely. And we can combine this with our ability to move, and all of a sudden we have a pretty fun game. There is one problem though. If I press W a whole lot, my ball goes flying. And I can do that an infinite number of times. So to get rid of this, again, we will make sure to check if it's standing on something. For this, Unity has made a function we can use. Normally, when you check for things, you use the if statement I just showed you. But this time, we're not going to use the if statement. We are going to use a separate function. So outside the function update, let's again type function. And this one is called onCollisionStay. This is something Unity made for us in order to check for stuff like if we are on the ground. It's a really great feature, but it's unusual to check for something outside an if statement. So this is really only when you're doing collision and triggers, then you type it in a separate function. If you want to check for something in all other cases, you use the if statement as a general rule. So open up the bracket keys, and in here we can type is falling should be equal to false. Because now when we collide with something or stand on an object, we are not falling. Awesome. Then we can go under the if statement here. We can go and tell, we can add something to our if statement. Basically, we want to check whether or not we are falling. So instead of making a separate if statement inside of this one, we could do that. We could make it look like this. Make the separate if statement in here and then just change this. Then we will simply use the AND sign to check for multiple things. So right next to the input.getButtonDownKeyCode.w, we will make a space, use the two AND symbols. There needs to be two of them. Another space, and now we can just type another requirement which needs to be met. This one is of course is falling should be equal to false. And whenever you check if a variable is something, you use two equals. If you only want to assign a variable or tell the variable to be something, you use one equals. All of this is not something you should remember just off of the top of your head. It will come slowly but surely. For now, you can just type after me, and then you will get it in the future, I promise. So, and is falling is equal to false. So if we are on the ground. And then, of course, if we do jump, then we want our is falling to be true, because we are not longer on the ground. We have just jumped, we have added our velocity, we cannot be on the ground any longer. So now that we have this code, let's go ahead and save it, and we should have a beautifully working jump function. So let's go ahead and jump a few times, and there I was actually able to jump twice. And this is because it's a really good idea to move the is falling outside of this if statement and put it right there. The reason why is not something I'm gonna explain. It's a little longer. Just make sure to put it there, and it should handle the code correctly. It's something about how Unity reads code. Now we should be able to jump just right, up and down, and roll from side to side. And if I just keep on pressing the button, I can only jump once we hit something. Great, so now we got our basic controls working. Congratulations, that's the first part of this video. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the video off here, guys, since else it's going to continue off in the distance. But part B will be out soon, hopefully. I will not take too long before it comes out, don't worry. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.